Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a pretty fascinating linguistic adventure. We're tracing the threads, the connections between the Kurdish language and the huge Indo-European family.
Yeah, it's a big family. Our sources really dig into the history, the linguistic roots, and, interestingly, the advantages for learners.
Right, and its presence in its, well, ancestral lands. Think of this as us trying to uncover a bit of a hidden chapter in language history.
Exactly. Our mission, really, is to unravel these links for you, showcasing some, honestly, remarkable similarities between Kurdish and languages maybe you already know, like English or German.
It's about offering a fresh perspective, right, on language history, where Kurdish fits, and shedding light on the Kurdish people's heritage.
Precisely.
Okay, so prepare for some real aha moments, hopefully. We're going to look at these similarities and just how significant Kurdish is. So let's start with the basics. Where does Kurdish fit in?
Okay, well, our sources place it firmly in the Indo-European family. That's the big one. And more specifically, it's part of the Iranian branch.
The Iranian branch. Okay, for those of us maybe less familiar with all the linguistic groupings, where is that geographically? And what other sort of well-known languages are in that group?
Good question. So geographically, think Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, parts of the Caucasus, Central Asia, that sort of area.
Right.
And other major languages. Well, you've got Persian or Farsi, Pashto, Balochi. Those are some of the big ones.
Okay.
So Kurdish shares a common ancestor there, but it's all within that wider Indo-European family that also includes, English, German, French, Hindi, Russian.
Yeah.
It's massive.
That really puts it into perspective. So Kurdish isn't some isolated language. It's plugged into this huge network.
Definitely not isolated.
And as our sources also point out, when we say Kurdish, it's not just one monolithic thing, is it? There are dialects.
Precisely. Yeah. The main ones you hear about are Kurmancî, Sorani, Zazaki, and Gorani. And these have developed over centuries within the historical region of Kurdistan.
And that region itself, Kurdistan, spanning parts of modern Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, its geography is key here, isn't it?
Hugely important. Historically, culturally, it's been a cohesive area. And for language, crucially, it acted as a sort of highway.
A highway for Indo-European languages moving and interacting.
Exactly. Its position wasn't just passive. It actively shaped the language.
Okay, so let's dig into that. How did Kurdistan become this linguistic melting pot?
Well, think about its location. Northern Mesopotamia, western Zagros Mountains, near the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
Right in the middle of things, historically.
Smack bang in the middle, a meeting point between East and West. So naturally, you get a huge amount of linguistic diversity. Kurdish has lived alongside and interacted with languages like Syriac, Armenian, Arabic, Persian, Turkish for centuries.
Wow.
And those interactions, they leave marks. They contribute to the variations we see in the Kurdish dialects today.
So it's like a constant conversation between languages over millennia, borrowing, influencing.
Pretty much. Our sources mention Zazaki, for instance, having links to northwestern Iranian languages, while Sorani shows more ties to central Iranian ones.
Which highlights that complex history. Okay, now let's get to some of those specific connections our sources mention. The structural, the phonetic similarities, especially with German and English, this is where it gets really tangible, doesn't it?
It really does. And what's fascinating is how basic some of these shared words are.
Yeah.
You mentioned Hibun in Kurdish earlier.
Yes, yeah.
That corresponds to German haben and English to have. I mean, it doesn't get much more fun than to have.
No.
When linguists trace relationships, we look for these patterns in sounds, grammar, core words. The more consistent they are, especially in basic stuff, the stronger the link to a shared ancestor.
And we're seeing that here.
Definitely. Another example, karin in Kurdish. It means to be able to or can.
Okay.
Think German können.
Können.
And English can.
Wow. That's clear. And it's not just verbs, is it? Nouns, too.
Absolutely. Take Schur in Kurdish, meaning sword, compared to German Schwert and English sword.
It's striking. Does the fact that these shared words are in such basic vocabulary tell us something specific?
It really does. Finding sans cognates these words with a shared origin in everyday concepts like having, being able, common objects like swords, it strongly points to a deep ancient connection, not just recent borrowing.
Right.
We also see shal in Kurdish.
Like German shawl.
Exactly. German shawl, English scarf.
Very.
And zor, meaning very.
Very. German.
Ger.
There.
Of course. Well, this keeps going. Sherman.
German shaman.
Right. Peng, meaning tight.
Sounds like English tight almost.
Very close. Kurt, short.
German Kuss.
Earth.
Erd in German.
Spot on. Stärk. Stuff.
Kurmanstern. It's pretty amazing.
It is. And more verbs. Birin, to bring.
Bringen.
Kartol, potato.
Kartoffel.
Shandin, to send.
Senden. It's uncanny sometimes.
It really is. Even pronouns. Kurdish, to, for you.
We German do.
Exactly. And rast, meaning right or correct.
German recht. English right.
Yeah. You can almost hear that ancient shared vocabulary.
It's like echoes, isn't it? And as the source stresses, this isn't just coincidence. It comes from that shared ancestor, Proto-Indo-European.
Millennia ago. But also, we can't forget the impact of all that cultural exchange and migration right there in the Kurdistan region over centuries. That plays a role too.
Which brings us to something really practical, the advantages this might give Kurdish speakers when they learn other Indo-European languages.
Exactly. Because of those shared roots, those structural similarities we've just touched on, Kurdish speakers often find, say, German or English a bit easier to pick up. The pathways are sort of pre-laid, linguistically speaking.
That makes total sense. If your own language has these echoes, these similar structures, verb patterns, word roots, it's like getting a head start.
It really is. Shared structures, maybe even related ways of thinking linguistically. It eases the process.
And it works the other way too, right?
Yes, it does. Speakers of other Indo-European languages might find Kurdish a bit more accessible than, say, a language from a completely different family because of that familiar grammar and vocabulary base.
Our source mentions the multilingualism you often see in Kurdish communities in Europe. Is that partly down to this?
That's a great real-world example, yeah. It showcases those linguistic bridges in action.
It really shows how these deep language links can actually help communication across cultures. Okay, let's zoom out again. The origins of the entire Indo-European family. This is a big topic in linguistics.
Huge topic. And there are basically two main competing ideas or hypotheses.
Okay.
First, there's the Kurgan hypothesis. This suggests the origin point was the Pontic-Caspian steppe, north of the Black Sea. Languages spread out from there, possibly with horse-riding cultures.
Right, the steppe theory. And the second one, our source seems to highlight this one more in relation to Kurdish.
That's the Anatolian hypothesis, championed by Colin Renfrew, among others. This idea proposes that actually the Indo-European homeland was in Anatolia and the Kurdistan region.
Wow. So modern-day Turkey and the surrounding areas.
Exactly. And the spread of these languages is linked not to horses, but to the spread of agriculture, starting maybe 9,000 years ago.
That's a fundamentally different picture. What's the main evidence for the Anatolian idea versus the Kurgan one? There must be debate.
Oh, absolutely. Big debates. The Anatolian hypothesis relies heavily on that correlation. Agriculture spreads from Anatolia, and the timing seems to fit estimates for Indo-European diversification.
Okay.
Proponents also point to the early presence and, importantly, the diversity of Indo-European branches in Anatolia, suggesting a long history there.
But the Kurgan side has its points, too.
For sure. They focus more on archaeological evidence of migrations from the steppes and linguistic analyses that perhaps suggest a slightly later time frame for the dispersal. It's complex, ongoing research.
So what does the Anatolian hypothesis mean for Kurdish specifically?
Well, if it's correct, it's huge. It positions Kurdish geographically and linguistically, not just as a branch on the tree, but potentially much closer to the root.
Closer to the origin point of the whole family.
Potentially, yes. It suggests Kurdish speakers might hold linguistic clues to some of the earliest migrations and cultural shifts across the Near East and into Europe. It could reshape how we see the whole timeline.
That really reframes things. Kurdish isn't just inheriting history. It might be right at the source of a big part of it.
It's a powerful idea.
Now, despite these incredibly deep roots and connections, the Kurdish language, well, it hasn't always had an easy time, historically speaking.
Sadly, no. I was putting it mildly. Our sources are clear about the significant challenges in countries like Turkey, Iran, Syria. Kurdish has faced periods of real suppression.
How so?
Outright bans on speaking it in public, assimilation policies trying to force people to use the dominant language, being excluded from schools and official life.
Which obviously limits its use, its development.
Absolutely. It restricts it to the private sphere, hinders standardization, literature, everything.
It's a sobering reminder that language is just so tied up with identity, with culture. Suppressing it has deep consequences.
Deep consequences.
But the sources also point to some more positive recent developments, especially maybe outside those countries or in certain regions.
Yes, thankfully. There has been a shift. Particularly in Iraqi Kurdistan, there's been more space for the language.
Like what?
Well, the establishment of Kurdish language in literature departments and universities there, that's huge for scholarship, for teaching, for standardizing.
In media, publishing.
Yes. Growth in Kurdish media outlets, more books being published, it shows a renewed energy in the language's public role.
And the diaspora, Kurds living in Europe, for example.
They've played a vital role. Our source highlights their efforts setting up cultural centers, running language courses, using digital platforms to connect speakers and learners.
It really shows the resilience, doesn't it? The determination to keep the language alive and thriving.
It's incredibly inspiring. It shows that language preservation is often driven by the community itself. People value it deeply.
And ultimately, these similarities we've talked about between Kurdish and German and English and others, they're not just interesting facts for linguists.
No, they reflect those deeper cultural and historical ties we mentioned earlier. They connect people across time and space.
Exactly. So preserving and developing Kurdish isn't just about grammar and vocabulary. It's tied to maintaining the identity, the collective memory, the whole worldview of the Kurdish people.
It's about safeguarding a really rich ancient heritage.
And thinking about these linguistic bridges, the potential for more understanding, more empathy, more cultural exchange between Kurdish people and, say, Europeans, because of this shared linguistic background, it feels significant.
It really does. It's a shared story, in a way.
So what does this mean for you listening, even if you don't speak Kurdish or German? Well, understanding these connections helps us appreciate our shared human history, how languages weave together over millennia. Supporting Kurdish, recognizing its value, it isn't just for Kurds themselves, it's acknowledging a piece of our collective linguistic and cultural heritage.
So, to quickly wrap up our deep dive today, we've journeyed into the ancient roots of Kurdish within the big Indo-European family. We've uncovered some pretty surprising linguistic links to languages you might know well.
Right.
We've looked at why the Kurdistan region is so important historically as a linguistic crossroads. And we've touched on the challenges the language has faced, but also the ongoing efforts to preserve and promote it.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Just consider how the existence of these connections, these echoes between languages, enriches our view of human history, how interconnected cultures really are across huge distances and time spans. What other fascinating insights might we find if we dug even deeper into the etymology, the origins of these shared words? What could they tell us about the daily lives, the shared world of our distant ancestors?
It's a compelling question. Makes you appreciate the deep, enduring power of language and culture.